Alright, so I've got some brake noise in Old Blue, my 1993 Dodge W250. I just want to show you a couple things that I'm doing to tighten up some of the clearances and the brake systems in the Dana 60 axles in these trucks. So one of the things in the factory service manual, not outlined in the Bendix disc brake section, but in the Chrysler disc brake section before, is you have the outer disc, or the outer pad itself. You have these two ears on each side of the pad, and when it sits in the caliper, it actually has a bit of play in and out this way. You can adjust the play in and out by bending those tabs in. You can't do so much up and down, but what you can do is you can take that pad, put it on the back of your vise, hammer it down, and bend those tabs down until the clearance is enough such that when you put it onto your caliper, it's a snug fit and it doesn't move around like that. Just do that to both sides. Alright, so I've got it so those ears onto the caliper, when it's seated, is a snug fit. I'm gonna have to use a C-clamp to actually press this on, because right now you can see there's a bit of a gap at the top. Same at the bottom. So I'm gonna use a C-clamp and a piece of hardwood on the back and just clamp it into place. But before I do that, what I'm gonna do to ensure that we have quiet operation of the brakes is I'm gonna use this disc brake quiet. CRC disc brake quiet, and that sort of just creates this like rubber layer on the backs of the pads before I install them. So we've taken up all the play in this pad. That's the outboard pad. The inboard pad, one of the things actually in some of my previous videos I think I was doing incorrectly, I was trying to clarify in the service manual, is this bottom spring. I had it in the correct orientation where the loop goes towards the inside of the vehicle, but I think this tab is actually supposed to seat in the caliper bracket such that this takes up the free play. So instead of having the pad sit like this where that tab is actually not on top and down here, that's the way I had it. But when you put it in like this, I'll show you. When you put it in like this, you could still have a bit of free play. But if you install it such that the bottom tab pushes up on the whole pad, if there's any movement in there, it'll spring up and down, eliminating any of that free play. So that's the second thing that'll take up the play on the inside pad. So we got the spring, adjust the tabs, use the disc brake quiet on the backs of those, and then the third thing that I'm going to do for the caliper itself is this this slot here at the bottom where they have this keyway that goes in with the spring on top. If your disc brake caliper brackets here have stretched and opened, this can actually, the free play down here can actually be quite significant to the point where your spring and or key falls out. My spring fell out when I was taking this apart. I noticed it was completely gone. So I'm going to take a measurement, and you can actually order oversized key slots for the caliper mount here. So combination of those things should really tighten up the brakes in the front of these trucks and these Dana 60 axles. So I got to take some measurements here. I'll show you how to take the measurements so I order the correct oversized key slot. All right, so I put a couple coats of that brake quiet on the backs of these pads and let them dry. So you can see the kind of final result here is it's a little bit tacky. So when you install them and then the caliper pushes on them, I'm assuming this just makes like a little bit of a layer barrier, which absorbs any sort of rattles. Okay, so I just used this block of wood and then a C-clamp just to press that on. So you can see now that's holding itself in there. There's literally no play anymore because I bent those ears so that way it would be a press fit onto there. So that is not going to rattle at all and cause any brake noise. So combination of those ears tightened and this disc brake quiet, that shouldn't make any noise at all on that side. And now I'll show you what the inboard pad looks like installed. All right, here's the inboard pad. Just a couple things to note actually. I just realized that this rotor is actually the incorrect thickness rotor. And so I came to that realization because it looked like the bottoms and the tops of this pad were sitting very far inwards. So I actually compared it to my red truck, and the rotors on that truck are almost 3/8 of an inch thicker, which is a pretty significant difference. Just want to look at show you the correct placement for that spring. So that spring where it has that tab goes in, so that way up and down there's no play. Okay, so I'm just going to show you how to measure for the oversized caliper key at the bottom. So I'm going to flash up an image that's on Torque King 4x4's website, but essentially they have a number of keys that are oversized, and in order to measure for this, you need to take your caliper just with the wedge and no spring, so no spring in there, and then wedge it up against the top of the caliper support bracket as far as you can, and then pull the bottom out so it's wedged up right against the key. Stick a pry bar in there if you can, and then pry it so it's really tight up against the top and tight against the inside edge of the key there. And then what you want to do is take a measurement from, let me just get my finger in here. You want to take a measurement from this top edge of the key to the bottom of the caliper. So I'm taking a measurement on this side as well as this side because they're slightly different. But essentially, based on that diagram that I pop up, this caliper is pretty screwed, I already know. Caliper support bracket, but the maximum they allow or they suggest is I think it was 0.22, and this is pretty much that, 0.22 of an inch, and that'll mean that I need to get the biggest oversized key slot. So it can't quite fit in on this side. Yeah, it just barely does, but essentially that means that I need the biggest key slot to replace this one, because this one is not big enough to take up that gap. Because as soon as, if I use this stock one with this stock spring, as soon as I hit the brakes, the caliper is going to go up that way and pull back, and then it's just going to fling that out immediately, rendering my brakes pretty much not really useless, but not as effective as they should be, because that's going to be rattling around and making noise. So I'm going to order some oversized caliper keys. I'm doing this side. I'm going to pull apart the other side, and I'll take the measurement on when I'm on that side so I can order that one as well. Here's an example of what you shouldn't be able to do. So there's the caliper key and spring installed. Just taking a pry bar. I should not be able to do this. That is way too loose. Here's also an example before I take this side apart of what you shouldn't see from your brake pad on the outboard side. And here's an example on this side of the caliper. This side's in much better shape. I can't even move it with the pry bar in both directions. So this one I can already tell is going to be in much better shape when I go to measure the caliper key. All right, and so here's on the passenger side, and this is an example of a good caliper support bracket. So I have about 0.05 inch feeler gauges in between the top of the wedge and the bottom of the caliper. So I believe in that diagram it was up to 0.06 inch is you're good to use the stock wedge. So it looks like I only need to get the wedge for the driver's side, and this side is in fact good once I get the spring in there. You know, kind of as seen before I even took it apart, it was pretty tight and I couldn't even move it with my pry bar. That's kind of what we want to see. So this just confirms that. Taking the measurement, and now I'm good to reassemble. I've bent the ears on the outboard brake pad and on the inboard pad. I put the spring the proper way. Tomorrow I'm going to go and pick up some new brake rotors that are the correct thickness, and then rip everything apart again and reinstall and repack the wheel bearings. Okay, so I've got the new oversized wedge and the spring in there. I've since had this together and driven the truck now for a couple of weeks, and all the brake noises that I had before are all gone at this point. So it was a combination of the outer pad, the inner pad, tightening those up, adding the disc brake quiet, and then if you need to, add that oversized wedge for the caliper, and that'll tighten up the brake noise, at least in the front of your old Dodge or Dana 60 axle. So if you're looking to do the same sort of thing in your truck, hopefully this video helps, and thanks for watching. Cheers.